Everyone was invited to my brother's graduation dinner, except me and my family. Dad mocked my education. So I stayed silent until my cousin posted photos from my own graduation ceremony, and suddenly everyone started calling me back. My name's Adrian, and I'm 27 years old. If you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably mumble something vague. He's quiet, or he works with computers or something. Not exactly glowing testimonials, right? That's been my life, though. The quiet one, the background character, the one who doesn't cause problems but somehow never quite gets the spotlight either. I used to think it was my fault that maybe I just wasn't the kind of person worth paying attention to. But over time, I started noticing a pattern where no matter how hard I worked, how much I helped out, how many times I showed up, I was always just overlooked. It was worse with my younger brother, Zach. He's 24 and he's everything I'm not, at least in my parents' eyes. Loud, confident, charming, the golden child since the day he was born. Every time he brought home a B positive, my mom would post it on Facebook like he'd just discovered a new planet. Meanwhile, when I quietly graduated from university with a double major computer science and digital media, both done while working 2 part-time jobs, my parents didn't even bring it up during dinner. Not once. No congratulations, no card, no acknowledgement. I remember sitting there at the table hoping someone would say something, anything. But Zach had just gotten a new job at some PR firm downtown, and that took over the whole conversation. I smiled and nodded and congratulated him like a good older brother. I always do. That moment stuck with me, but I let it go like I always do. I had more important things to focus on anyway. I'd finally enrolled in a master's program. A big deal since I was the first in our family to even go beyond undergrad, and I was balancing it with a full-time job in UX design. It was hard, lonely sometimes, but it felt good to build something of my own, something I could be proud of, even if nobody noticed. I didn't expect a parade. I didn't even expect applause. But I did think maybe when I finished my program in May, they'd come to my graduation ceremony. Maybe. Then last month, my Aunt Lisa called. She sounded bubbly chipper the way she always does when she's about to ask a favor. Adrian, sweetie, just wanted to check. Are you free on the 10th? Zach's having his graduation dinner at that new steakhouse downtown. Your mom and dad are organizing it. Should be a blast. I blinked, confused. The 10th? Wait, nobody told me about this. Lisa paused, awkward for a beat. Oh, huh. I figured they would have. Maybe it slipped their minds, right? So I called my dad. Just straightforward, no drama. I asked about the dinner. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. Oh, he said casually. Yeah, we didn't think you'd want to come. I mean, you barely finished school yourself, right? Figured you wouldn't be interested in all the academic stuff. It hit me like a slap even though it wasn't new. Just louder this time. And that little laugh in his voice like he was making some joke I should laugh along with. I didn't. I just said, okay then, don't worry about my ceremony next month. There was silence on the other end, then a dismissive, suit yourself. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just hung up. For a few days, I stood in silence. I didn't tell anyone what he said. I kept going to work, kept writing my thesis, kept helping my roommate fix his car after work, and replying to Slack messages at 11 p.m. like nothing had happened. But inside, something had changed. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way I used to be. I wasn't hurt. I was done. Done trying to prove anything to people who refused to see me. Done being their quiet, reliable afterthought. So I started planning. Not revenge. Exactly. Just clarity. Visibility. I wanted the truth to be visible even if they didn't want to see it. 2 weeks later, Zach's graduation dinner happened without me, just like they planned. I heard all about it from Instagram. My cousin Chloe posted photos of the whole night, Zach holding up some giant bottle of champagne, my parents laughing in the background, my Aunt Lisa doing that dramatic wine toast thing she always does. In one picture, Zach was leaning back in his chair while everyone clapped for him. It had 117 likes. The next morning, I woke up, showered, and checked my inbox. The final confirmation was there. My graduation ceremony had been scheduled and approved. I'd be walking the stage in exactly 3 weeks. I opened the attached guest form. You could invite up to 8 people. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed in every name that mattered. My best friend from high school who'd stuck by me when I was going through my worst depression. My thesis advisor, who had actually read my entire 80-page paper and sent notes with smiley faces in the margins. My roommate, who cooked for me during finals week. My neighbor, Mr. Chun, who always asked how my classes were going and actually listened to the answers. I left my parents' names off the list. I didn't tell them. I didn't announce anything. I didn't post a countdown on Facebook or send out a family group text. I just lived my life. Then the day came. It was warm, sunny. The ceremony was held outdoors on the university lawn. There were white folding chairs and bright blue banners with the school's crest. My name was called near the end, and I walked across the stage with my head high and my eyes forward. I didn't look around to see who was or wasn't there. I just smiled, shook hands, and took my diploma. Afterward, we took pictures, laughing, sweaty, squinting in the sun. Chloe, my cousin, snapped a selfie with me and uploaded it almost instantly. But she didn't just post the photo. She added a location tag, too, and a caption, "Proud of you, Adrian. Finally getting the recognition you deserve." In the background of the picture was a banner big, blue, and impossible to miss. It was stretched across the brick wall behind the stage and read, "Congratulations, Adrian Singh, Master of Science in UX and Digital Strategy." My face was on it literally. A blown-up, smiling photo of me from our undergrad graduation 4 years ago. My advisor had submitted it as part of the Student Spotlight feature, and the school had turned it into a full banner. Everyone at the ceremony saw it. Everyone in the photo saw it. And apparently so did my mom, because 3 hours later I had 4 missed calls from her. 2 from my dad, 1 from Zach, all in rapid succession, a voicemail, 2 just my mom saying, "Adrian, why didn't you tell us?" before it cut off. That was just the beginning, but it was enough to make me finally exhale. The first thing I did after reading the voicemail was put my phone face down on the nightstand and walk into the kitchen. My roommate Sam was making celebratory pancakes. He had a thing for breakfast food during milestones, said it made everything feel more grounded. I laughed, sat at the counter, and sipped coffee while the batter sizzled on the pan. He raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" I shrugged. They found out. He didn't have to ask who they were. Sam had seen enough of the stories to understand the dynamics. My family didn't hate me. That would have been easier. They just ignored me. Or worse, undermined me with a smile like they were doing me a favor by doubting me. And now they were calling because the rest of the world had noticed something they didn't. By noon, I had 10 missed calls. Then texts, a family group chat that I hadn't opened in months, suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. "Mom, Adrian, why didn't you tell us about today? We would have come." "Dad, you're being dramatic. We didn't know it was such a big deal. Zach, dude, everyone's talking about that banner. Even Aunt Priya saw it. You could have said something." I didn't respond. Not right away. I watched the texts pile up while I sat in the backyard with Sam and my neighbor, Mr. Chan, who came over to drop off homemade almond cookies and ended up staying to celebrate. We sat around with paper plates congratulating each other like old friends. Mr. Chun told me stories about when he worked in electrical engineering in the 80s. Sam made a terrible joke about UX designers being the unsung heroes of online rage, and I just soaked it all in. It wasn't until late that night, around 11:30, that I finally picked up the phone. I called my mom. 1 ring, 2, then she answered, her voice immediately too soft, too sugary. "Adrian," she said, "honey, we were so surprised to see the post from Chloe. I didn't even know you were graduating today." I didn't say anything right away. I let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" she asked again, sounding genuinely confused. I finally spoke. "You didn't tell me about Zach's dinner." "That's different," she said quickly. "We thought you might not want to go." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable and you thought I wouldn't want you at my graduation. Silence then. "Well, if you wanted us there, you should have." "I did for years." That shut her up. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was just stating facts calmly, plainly, like I was writing an email at work. "I invited you to my undergrad ceremony. You said you had a golf tournament. I showed you my thesis, and you changed the subject to Zach's new girlfriend. Every time I tried to tell you something I was proud of, you redirected the conversation to him." She sputtered. "That's not fair. It's true." I paused, letting her sit with that. "I didn't invite you today because I didn't want another memory with you not looking up from your phone or smiling politely while you asked when I was going to do something real." I never said that, she said, suddenly defensive. "That's not how I meant it, but it's how it felt." We were quiet again. Then she asked more gently this time, "Is this what you want Adrian to cut us out completely over one missed dinner?" I almost laughed again. The dinner. That's all they ever saw. The surface level moments. Never the buildup, the patterns, the slow erosion of self-worth after years of being treated like a footnote. "No," I said, "I don't want to cut anyone out, but I do want you to understand that I'm not your second-place child. I'm not the understudy in Zach's life story." More silence. Then she muttered, "I just wish you would have told us how much it meant to you." I exhaled through my nose. I did. You just didn't listen. I hung up before she could answer. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was upset, but because something inside me was shifting. Something that had been twisted and suppressed for years. I wasn't just mad anymore. I wasn't sad. I was free, but I wasn't done. The next morning, I sent out a few emails. Nothing petty, just formal requests. I reached out to the university's digital media department where I'd done my assistantship and asked if they'd be interested in featuring my thesis project, which had already gotten attention from a couple tech blogs. They said yes, of course. Then I asked if they'd consider naming the next graduate student grant after my late grandmother, the only person in my family who'd believed in me unconditionally. She'd passed when I was 16, but I still remembered how she'd tell me, "One day they'll see you." By Thursday, the university's social media had posted a photo of me presenting my project. Captioned, "Alumnist Adrian Singh revolutionizes student UX models. Full spotlight on our site." It got shared hundreds of times, and that's when the calls really started. From family members I hadn't spoken to in years. From cousins who suddenly remembered that I existed. From my mom again and my dad too. Both alternating between pride and guilt. Trying to find a middle ground where they could pretend they'd supported me all along. I didn't block them. I didn't explode. I just didn't reply. But then something happened that forced me to respond. Zach showed up. He was waiting outside my building on Saturday afternoon, hoodie on, hands in his pockets, leaning against the brick like he owned the place. When I stepped out with a bag of groceries, I almost didn't recognize him. "Hey," he said, pushing off the wall. I nodded. "Hey, you really weren't going to tell me. Would you have come?" He opened his mouth, then shut it. "Look, man, I get it. I do. They always compared us, and I know that sucked, but that's not on me." I raised an eyebrow. "No, you didn't mind the praise, though. Never once said, actually, Adrienne helped me with that project. Or Adrienne's graduating too. You were happy to take it all and let me disappear." Zach looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I didn't think it mattered that much to you. And that's the problem." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "So what now? You're going to cut us all off forever." "No, I said I'm going to keep doing what I've always done, working hard, being proud of what I build. But from now on, I'm not going to sit quietly while everyone else takes credit or makes me feel small." Zach nodded slowly. "Okay, that's fair." He started to walk away, but turned back once. "For what it's worth, the banner was pretty cool." I smirked. "Thanks." He left, and I stood there for a long time, the grocery bag in one hand, the city humming around me, and then I got the email that would change everything. The email came from an unfamiliar address at first glance. I assumed it was spam and almost deleted it. But then I saw the subject line, "Your thesis caught our eye. Let's talk." I clicked it open, heart thudding a little harder than I expected. Inside, it was short and professional. "Hi, Adrian. I recently came across your UX and digital strategy thesis while researching student design innovations. Your work on interface empathy and user-centered frameworks was not only sharp, but deeply resonant with what our firm is exploring for an upcoming partnership project. We're currently assembling a task force for a high-profile campaign, and I'd love to set up a meeting if you're open to discussing potential collaboration. Timing is tight, so please let us know by next week if you're available. Looking forward, Camille Ross, Executive Strategy Director." I read it 3 times, then I stood up and walked around the apartment for 5 full minutes, muttering things like, "Is this real?" and "No way," under my breath. Camille Ross. I'd read her article on UI innovation just 2 months ago. She was one of the top minds in the field. Her firm had contracts with both Tesla and the Smithsonian, and somehow they had found me. I forwarded the email to my advisor with a question mark in the subject line. She replied 10 minutes later, "Yes, this is real. Take the meeting." And just like that, the narrative started shifting, not just in my head, but tangibly, visibly. The kid who barely finished school was being headhunted by one of the top firms in the country. Still, I didn't tell my family. I wasn't interested in their approval anymore. I wasn't chasing a pat on the head. This wasn't for them. But of course, the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Because 3 days later, I got a message from my mom. It was a screenshot of my photo, me standing next to Camille, smiling in front of the Future Form logo. The school's media team had posted it on their official LinkedIn. From thesis to thought leader, how Adrian Singh is redefining digital empathy. My mom's message said simply, "Why are we finding out about this from the internet?" I didn't reply. Not to that one, but later that night, I got a longer text from my dad. It wasn't angry or dismissive or laced with backhanded compliments like usual. It was apologetic almost. Son, I think I owe you an apology, maybe more than one. I didn't realize how much I'd overlooked. We were wrong not to be there. I was wrong not to see you for who you are. I stared at the message for a long time, typed out 4 different responses, deleted them all. Then finally I wrote back, "Thank you for saying that. I'm not angry anymore, but I won't pretend the past didn't happen." He didn't reply. Not that night, not the next morning, but something had shifted. Still, all of that was just the undercurrent, because what happened the following weekend brought everything to the surface. It started with an unexpected phone call from Aunt Priya of all people. She never called, ever. She was my dad's older sister, retired now, the type of woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and corrected your grammar mid-sentence. "Adrian," she said curtly, "I think it's time we had a proper conversation." I braced myself. But what she said next took the air right out of my lungs. I saw the article, she continued. "And I want to speak candidly. Your parents have always favored Zach. It's been obvious since you were children. I told them so more than once. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't even known she noticed. They made excuses," she said. "S said you were different. Quiet, too sensitive. But I've watched from the sidelines long enough. And I'm done staying silent." I sat down at the kitchen table. My hands were shaking. "There's a family trust being discussed," she said carefully. "You're supposed to be part of it. But the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if your name suddenly disappeared from the papers." My heart dropped. "What do you mean, I mean? They've already been talking about giving Zach power of attorney over your father's side. I found out yesterday. I felt the blood drain from my face. I'd never even heard about this trust before. I thought you should know," she said, "because it's not fair and you deserve better." After the call, I sat for a long time with my phone in my hand and my pulse roaring in my ears. All the late nights, the swallowed pain, the years of being sidelined. And now when I was finally standing tall, they were quietly preparing to erase me again. No, not this time. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email. Not to my parents, not to Zach, to a lawyer. I still hadn't said a word to them about what I knew. I didn't need to, not yet. I wanted to make sure everything was documented, airtight, undeniable, because this time I wasn't walking away. This time they were going to have to see me. Every part of me, especially the part they tried so hard to ignore. I spent the next week in a haze of legal calls, quiet research, and old emails I never thought I'd need again. Every Christmas receipt, every screenshot of conversations where I was guilt-tripped into giving Zach money just for a bit. Every time I paid the property taxes on the lake house that apparently was never going to be in my name, I dug it all up. It was exhausting, infuriating, but also weirdly satisfying. Like every piece of proof made my reality just a little more solid. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the favoritism. I'd been quietly funding a narrative that painted me as the lesser son. My lawyer, Diane Sharp, calm and relentless, walked me through every step. "They can't remove you from a trust that includes your name without a challenge," she explained. "But they can try to shift authority, especially if Zach's been named as a future executive or if any part of it wasn't properly updated. You need to get ahead of this." And I did. We filed for full access to the trust records, citing financial interest and recent activity that raised red flags. I authorized a full audit, which triggered formal notice to both of my parents. That was when the silence ended. I was at work the next morning when my phone started vibrating every 10 minutes. First my mom, then my dad, then Zach, then a barrage of texts. "Mom, Adrian, what are you doing? You're blowing things out of proportion. Dad, you really got a lawyer involved. Why would you do this to us? Zach, bro, a trust audit. You're making it look like we're criminals." They weren't. Not technically, but they weren't innocent either. Later that night, my mom left a voicemail. Her voice brittle. "We never meant to hurt you, but you have to understand things were easier with Zach. He needed more. You were always so independent." There it was. The excuse. The thing I'd heard my whole life, that because I didn't scream for attention, I didn't need love. That being self-sufficient meant I didn't deserve celebration. That voicemail was the last straw. I didn't reply. Not yet. I waited until Diane's team finished their review. What we found was a tangled mess of estate plans, all drafted hastily over the years, but clear enough in one regard. My grandfather had left equal shares of a future property development to both grandsons. It had sat dormant for years, but recently my father and uncle had begun planning to liquidate the land and had listed Zach as the sole inheritor. I had documentation, I had emails, and now I had leverage. We filed a formal challenge to the title change and sent out cease and desist letters to both my father and uncle regarding any development until the inheritance dispute was resolved. And then I made it public, not in a petty way. I didn't post it all over Facebook or start some more online. Instead, I gave a talk and invited presentation at the university's upcoming alumni summit. My topic: the cost of being overlooked, personal identity and professional visibility. It wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. I spoke candidly, not naming names but telling my story. About the years I spent proving myself to a family that only clapped for one son. About what it meant to constantly earn but never receive. About the strength it took to stop waiting and start acting. There were 200 people in that auditorium. One of them was Chloe, my cousin, who came up to me afterward with tears in her eyes. "I wish I'd noticed earlier," she said. Another was Aunt Priya. She didn't say anything, just hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. A week later, the university's media department published the full transcript online. It spread like wildfire through the alumni network. Faculty emailed me. Former classmates shared it. The talk was picked up by a podcast, and then someone forwarded it to my parents. I didn't know they'd listen to it until a Sunday afternoon when I got a knock at my apartment door. I opened it and found my dad standing there, hands in his pockets, looking older than I remembered. My mom was behind him holding a box. They came in, sat quietly on the couch. My roommate, sensing the tension, made himself scarce. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my dad cleared his throat. "We didn't see things clearly. We see them now." My mom placed the box on the coffee table. Inside were dozens of old photographs, school projects, even some awards I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. "We kept them," she said, "but we never knew how to show we were proud of you." I looked at the box. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase what happened, but it was something. Then my dad said the thing I never thought I'd hear. "We're putting everything on hold. The sale, until this is resolved the right way." I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't perfect. There was no sweeping apology that fixed decades of erasure, but there was acknowledgement, there was movement, and there was finally equity. The audit concluded in my favor. The trust was amended to reflect the original intent: equal shares. I opted to invest mine into a new foundation supporting first-gen students pursuing design. I named it after my grandmother. Zach and I aren't close. We probably never will be. But he sent a donation to the foundation without saying a word, and that somehow meant more than any phone call. My parents didn't suddenly transform, but they started showing up quietly, authentically. And me, I moved forward not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because sometimes the real revenge isn't shouting louder. It's being undeniable. It's becoming so visible that they can never again pretend you weren't there. And that's exactly what I